Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a truly wild story of American enterprise. We're going to look at how a legendary 19th century stagecoach company evolved into a massive $2 trillion modern banking empire. But more importantly, we're going to see how it nearly destroyed itself completely from the inside out and the drastic, unprecedented measures it took to fight its way back from the brink. Let's get into it. Okay, let's just dive right in with a staggering number. 1.5 million. That is the number of unauthorized accounts that were secretly created by Wells Fargo employees for their own customers. I mean, it completely shatters that classic image of the trustee's stagecoach protecting your gold, right? And it really begs the ultimate question. How on earth did a bank that literally became famous for ruthlessly protecting its clients' money end up robbing them? Section 1. Forged in the Gold Rush. To truly understand the corporate rot of the 2010s, we have to establish what they were actually rotting away in the first place. So, picture this. It's 1852, right at the absolute height of the California gold rush. Henry Wells and William G. Fargo desperately wanted to expand their express delivery business out west. But their conservative partner at American Express, John Butterfield, firmly shut the idea down. He thought it was just way too risky. But the opportunity was too good to pass up. So, what did they do? They went rogue. They acted in secret, completely behind Butterfield's back, to charter Wells Fargo and Company. They stepped right into the utter chaos of the gold rush, a place where miners had zero roads, no law enforcement, and absolutely no safe way to store their gold dust. From the jump, their reputation for absolute reliability was ironclad. Take 1855, for example. A massive financial panic swept through California, causing huge runs on the banks. Over in the Auburn branch, crowds of panicked, angry miners completely surrounded the office. But the branch manager, this 20-something kid named John Quincy Jackson, he didn't run. He called in his local friends and used his deep, personal credibility with the miners to just stand down the mob. And it worked. No violence erupted, the crowd dispersed, and he saved the bank, simply because the community trusted him implicitly. Honestly, if he had failed there, it could have triggered a chain reaction that destroyed the entire company. Section 2. Wars, Panics, and Heists. Over the next century, that legendary reliability was tested over and over again by massive external crises and some pretty stunning internal betrayals. The sheer level of trust people had in Wells Fargo was staggering. Consider the devastating 1906 San Francisco earthquake. The entire city was basically in ruins, but the bank managed to reopen quickly and they honored every single depositor. Because they proved their strength when things looked their absolute darkest, public confidence just exploded. Their deposits actually more than doubled, jumping from $16 million all the way to $35 million in just 18 months. But as time marched on, forces totally beyond their controls started reshaping them. When America entered World War I, the U.S. government decided it needed a unified delivery network for the war effort. So in 1918, they forced all the private express delivery companies to merge into a single national entity. Just like that, in the blink of an eye, Wells Fargo was completely stripped of its iconic stagecoach routes. The express business was gone forever, leaving them to survive solely as a commercial bank based in San Francisco. Now fast forward to 1981. That highly trusted banking institution suffered an unthinkable internal betrayal. Over $21 million just vanished. At the time, it was the largest bank embezzlement in U.S. history. A highly trusted Beverly Hills operations manager named Ben Lewis had spent years manipulating accounts. And why? To secretly siphon all that cash to a flashy boxing promoter. As you can imagine, it was a massive public humiliation for the bank's leadership. And then, just 2 years later, boom, they were hit again. In the 1983 White Eagle heist, an armored guard actually tied up his own coworkers and stole $7.2 million in an inside job, orchestrated by Puerto Rican separatists. But here's where it gets interesting. The new CEO, Carl Reichardt, somehow turned this total disaster into a massive PR win. He relentlessly cooperated with the FBI, handing over every single scrap of evidence to hunt the perpetrators down. He basically proved to the public that, just like the old stagecoach days, Wells Fargo would ruthlessly hunt down anyone who messed with their money. Section 3. The Era of Mega Mergers. Banking in the 1980s and 90s was completely transforming. Deregulation and fierce competition turned the whole industry into a massive game of eat or be eaten. To survive, Wells Fargo launched an incredibly aggressive expansion strategy. They just started swallowing massive regional banks to scale up as fast as possible. It kicked off with buying Crocker National Bank at a bargain back in 1986. Then came a really messy, hostile takeover of First Interstate in 1996. After that, they merged with Norwest in 1998 and eventually capped it all off with a dramatic $15.1 billion acquisition of Wachovia, right smack in the middle of the 2008 financial crisis. But the really crucial turning point here is that 1998 deal with Norwest. On paper, it was billed as a merger of equals, but in reality, it was a reverse takeover in disguise. Norwest was actually the smaller bank, but its leadership basically took charge of the entire combined company. So while the historic Wells Fargo name survived, the culture fundamentally shifted. Norwest brought in this incredibly high-pressure retail banking strategy that focused heavily on aggressive sales. And this invisible shift, it completely altered Wells Fargo's DNA. Section 4, the fake accounts scandal. So that toxic DNA lay dormant and just festered for years, eventually erupting into the most devastating and heavily publicized scandal in modern banking history. It is honestly crazy to contrast the old Wells Fargo with the new one. Back in the 1850s, they used literal armed posses to hunt down thieves and protect their clients' assets. But jump to the 2010s, and modern Wells Fargo was using ruthless corporate retaliation to protect a system that was actively robbing their clients. For instance, when branch manager Claudia Ponce de Leon called the ethics hotline in 2011 to report employees who were opening fraudulent accounts, she wasn't rewarded for doing the right thing. She was fired just 3 weeks later. And the sheer scale of this problem was mind-boggling. Over a span of just a few years, a staggering 5,300 employees were fired. Why? Because to survive the bank's crushing performance metrics, they had resorted to secretly opening 1.5 million fake deposit accounts and 500,000 fake credit cards. We're not talking about a few bad apples here. These isolated survival tactics had spread like a virus across the entire company. At the root of all that rot was a sacred corporate mantra: 8 is great. It was pushed incredibly aggressively by CEO John Stumpf, and the goal was to force employees to sell 8 different financial products to every single household they interacted with. It literally turned branch offices into pressure cookers. Everyday bankers felt completely trapped between losing their livelihoods or bending the rules to hit these totally impossible goals. Well, when the news finally broke, the fallout was absolute destruction. The bank got slammed with a $185 million regulatory fine. CEO John Stumpf, the very architect of this toxic culture, was ousted and forced to forfeit $41 million in stock. And then, in a completely unprecedented move on her very last day in office in 2018, Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen slapped a suffocating growth cap on the bank, freezing their assets at $1.95 trillion. Section 5, a $2 trillion turnaround. With its reputation in absolute ruins and its growth legally frozen by the U.S. government, Wells Fargo was teetering on the brink of being swallowed up by its rivals. They desperately needed an outsider to step in and perform a massive corporate exorcism. Enter Charlie Scharf in late 2019. Scharf was a turnaround specialist, a protege of banking legend Jamie Dimon. He came in, looked at the bank, and immediately realized he couldn't just tweak the existing culture. A few policy changes weren't going to cut it. He had to completely gut the rotting core of this 170-year-old institution from the ground up. And Scharf's methodical cleanup was staggering. It's easily one of the largest in corporate history. He didn't just casually replace top leadership. He oversaw the firing of 55,000 employees to truly clean house. He exited unprofitable mortgage sectors, he ripped out those toxic sales quotas and replaced them with strict ethics reviews, and he heavily upgraded their risk controls. He knew he had to prioritize compliance and stability over raw profit because that was literally the only way to appease the Federal Reserve. And you know what? His patience actually paid off. After 7 grueling years of restructuring, rebuilding public trust, and completely overhauling their internal systems, the Fed finally lifted that asset cap on June 3, 2025. Freed from those shackles, Wells Fargo immediately surged past the $2 trillion mark in assets for the very first time. They were finally, truly back in the game. So, while Charlie Scharf successfully saved this historic brand and put them back on the map, this whole explainer leaves us with one pretty chilling takeaway about modern corporate power. Think about it. It took over a century to build an ironclad reputation, and just a few years of toxic metrics to almost tear the whole thing down. If a bank this big and this deeply ingrained in American history can almost destroy itself from the inside out, What's stopping it from happening again somewhere else? Definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.